I can't today.
I know, I'm moving around all over the place,
Yeah.
and we want to get people in for interviews, so we're finishing up last one.
Bom dia, minha gente.
Hey, Merle.
How's Merle?
Merle's good.
Good.
Hi, everybody.
Howdy.
Feel like we just met as a commission. When did this meeting come from? I'm sorry I was late with my agenda. I've just created one. I do apologize, Cindy, but thank you for the reminder. That's really crept up on me.
I said no worries, and then I reminded myself I was muted. Not trying to complicate FOIA things. I made a pretty rough agenda because I'm actually kind of curious, especially after the larger commission meeting, what people feel the priorities of this group should look like. I know that, certainly we'll want to continue and maybe set a deadline for having, I'd like to hear from Cindy a little bit if there are any updates. We might want to talk a little bit about the Declaring Freedom convening at CCSU. I would like to have a follow-up conversation on, especially, with Merle and the work that we did kind of as a larger commission. And I know that I should add this to the agenda now. We have criteria from the IDEA subcommittee that I think we should probably look at as a subcommittee too. Help me make my agenda today. Where are our priorities? Because I have to be honest, I've been thinking a lot about the conversations that we've been having, but I have been thinking less about what do we need to do in this meeting. So I'd appreciate insight from anyone who has some thoughts on that. Thank you for sharing the agenda. I think that's the agenda that I just made. Where is it? I have so many Chrome profiles and Chrome windows. Here we go. We should probably talk about exactly where to put this, but how many folks will be with us? Thoughts?
I was just trying to guess my password. Email.
No,
I got it.
I have this problem
right.
too.
Right.
I don't log in often enough to have it at my
Yeah, it didn't automatic. I thought I saved it. It didn't. So yeah. Okay.
No worries.
Give me one moment.
No problem. So, we might want to talk about Oh, good. Yes, Cindy, please add some things. Oh, great. Oh.
I figured it would be easier to have it all in one place.
Great. That's wonderful. Okay. Is this looking good to folks? It looks like enough of a skeleton to me that I
Yeah,
think we can work
I
with
think
this.
so. I
Um,
agree.
Great. Well, thank you all for being here this morning. Looks like we have sort of a small group today. I know that the legislative session began yesterday, and I was curious, Cindy, if you had any updates for the group about how things are looking and anything on the funding side of things that you might want to share that could be relevant to our conversations today.
Yeah, so we are taking a few different approaches for funding, whether it's a legislative appropriation or bonding. The hope is that we can make the argument for the 250th being cultural infrastructure and using that as a reason for these funds to be bonded, which would make it much easier for the next few years to ensure that we have some continuity. It's a tough sell because the state of Connecticut really wants to keep as much bonding as possible to capital costs. And we did consider applying for bonding for capital costs for improvements to historic sites around the state. But in looking through ADA self-assessments from about 300 organizations, most people are saying that they do not need capital improvements. So we don't have the data to back up an ask to the legislature for capital funds for the 250th. So here we are. And I mean, that's really, so we're taking these two approaches. Lots of people are supportive, but I feel like that doesn't mean anything until May.
So really, we don't have any money, that's been earmarked or promised or anything like that. Just, is that about at this
Yes.
point? Like,
We
but then again,
just-
money isn't really, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Are there private funds that are materializing yet, or are there any other things that would be good for us to know about?
So we did receive a sponsorship from one private foundation in the amount of 100,000. So we should have a second staff person coming on to kind of help wrangle all of this. And we unexpectedly have to cover quite a bit of the conference. So some of those funds will also be going towards that.
Okay.
There were some miscommunications in terms of how many days were funded. And
Okay.
so here we are.
Okay, good.
It's a lot of money.
Yep.
So I'm just going to ask the question that is usually, at least in my mind, in the nonprofit sector.
Mm-hmm.
If our budgets are a reflection of our values,
Mm-hmm.
what are we understanding about where and this is placed in terms of values with the legislature, and or funds earmarked at at the state level to actually participate. Because right now, this seems like we're trying to, well, literally do it with nothing. Maybe at best, we'll MacGyver something together with a toothpick, um, uh, paperclip, and some gum.
Yeah. And that's a very real question. I think legislators see the value. The problem is we're having a hard time with the executive branch, which is challenging given that we were established by an executive order. So
Yeah, I'm kind of curious about that because I did get actually a phone call in the office from someone who was like, I had heard that the governor is axing the commission or like isn't like it's not happening anymore. And can you give me I was like, I called her back and I was like, no, I'm on the commission. I'm pretty sure I would have heard if
No.
if like, something was being abandoned, but I haven't had a chance. I left her a voicemail. I haven't been able to connect with this person, but
So
it's concerning that
Yeah.
that kind of a rumor would be out there. So I'm
So-
interested to hear what you said about the executive branch.
no, so that's
Yeah.
they spoke with Leanne in our office.
Okay.
And it was a misunderstanding because during the last commission meeting, we said we were not signing on to the National Commission. Somebody misinterpreted that
I
and thought
see.
that we were not going to be a commission any longer.
I see.
So,
Okay.
we are here through 2028.
Yes.
With our shoestring budget.
That's what I
Unless
assured this
we do
person.
something else.
Okay, good. Glad to hear that up. Yeah, I mean, I was gratified to, it was sort of mixed, I guess, because, it was good. There was Dan Har had a column and, was talking about, the legislative session and, Kathy Austin was talking about the 250th. She was talking about it as a birthday party, but, she was talking about it. So there's at least, it sounds like there are some supportive people out there who would like to send some money to this, whatever that looked like. I appreciate those updates, Cindy. Thank you.
So we'll keep everyone updated as the session goes on. Hopefully by our April commission meeting, we'll have a good idea of what direction things are going in. But we do have some bills that are being introduced to help. So there's progress. We'll just have to see how everything shakes out.
Cindy, can I ask?
It's not a money session, right? It's a non-budget season session, right? Yeah. And I think I stepped on Andy, and I'm sorry.
That's okay. Can I ask what does the pitch look like to the legislature? Just because we've been, I think, proudly not planning things. So I'm wondering, what's Connecticut Humanities asking the legislature to fund exactly?
Yeah. Just give me 1 second. I want to make sure I don't miss anything. But overall, administrative support, funds for granting for both Connecticut Humanities and the Office of the Arts. Funds to continue some capacity building programs in historic sites that we've had in the past. So museum makeover, collections assessment, something to digitize some of the collections that exist around the state, and support for, oh, come back, you were just there, helping smaller organizations. So bringing back a STEPS type of program. So helping smaller organizations kind of get their ducks in a row. So that is a significant portion of the ask. There is some administrative funding to help with an increased grant load. Funds for education initiatives with the Department of Education and other organizations that are working with students and teachers, so professional development, things like that. Some funds for the development of a small panel exhibition about Connecticut's role in the Revolutionary War, and kind of something that can be shared with municipalities that if they wanted to, they could add on to it, but it would be kind of a complete story in and of itself. And then funding for allowing some engagement type work in terms of like bringing people together, us going, by us, I mean the commission going to places like fairs and festivals to kind of share information. And then separate from that, significant funds for the Office of Marketing within DECD to kind of promote the events and things that are going on around the state. And I think that's everything. Hopefully I'm not missing anything big.
And that, thank you very much. And I'm impressed you can do it off the top of your head too. What, so, but that's a separate request from, is it this, is that Connecticut Humanities request? Is it one request, or these two different, is there a 250th and a Connecticut Humanities, two separate?
They're two separate.
They're not bundled. So some of the 250 money goes for administrative costs to Connecticut Humanities, but it's a separate. I wonder, and I'm like way out of my lane here. So you've thought of this already, and I'm apologizing for asking a question you figured out 2 months ago. But just to come up to speed, have you thought about like pitching a more concrete project for the legislature to fund that is sort of an empty bucket, but that they could fill, like the 250 network that's going to bring together these 50 institutions and organizations around the state to do coordinated programming, basically what we're doing, but something that sounds a little bit more coherent. Just in like everything you said is good and adds up to this, but you didn't describe it in that way. I just wonder if legislators, like, are they hearing that like there's a program that can happen with funding or not happen without it? It's not a bunch of piecemeal supports. It is this coherent statewide vision. Are they like, what do you make of that? That's what I'm asking.
Oh, I wish Jason were here. He would be able to do his pitch a little better than I have. So I think in terms of the ask itself is really an ask for $14 million to really bring the 250th to the cultural sector. It isn't split up in this way when we speak to legislators. It's much more cohesive. I just want you all to know kind of what the pieces are within that.
I totally appreciate that. And I understand. That's why I was asking, like, what is the sort of public representation of that? Of that budget.
And Jason does a great job of just kind of summarizing that this is all about bringing the 4 themes that the commission has developed into every community around the state and really working closely. A lot of the pitch is around tourism, and because that's what people care about, in terms of that's the return on the investment that the state sees for what's happening. I think there are a lot of arguments for a quality of life return on investment as well, but the economic investment is the easiest to quantify for people. So that's a lot of what we've been talking about.
Yeah, I just that all. I mean, that all sounds very good, and I understand leading with economy, and it's easy to add a sentence that says this is one of those really happy economic development situations where we're going to have a huge economic return on building our civic dialogue and making our democracy stronger. Is going to pay out in tourism dollars. It's like a great thing to be able to say in this case. So I'm with you on that. I wonder, like, just by way of, Amherst was asking what we should talk about, and this is also thinking about what Merle said. I think either we don't have anything to talk about, we should make a plan for what we're going to do with no money, or we should start sketching what we're going to do with the money and make in a way that might attract investment. I think we should, I think those are the three choices. One is to sort of claim, just sort of build the program, and so that we can, to give Jason and you some things to go out and raise, because I think that you're probably doing the best you can, but the mechanism that we've described for this makes it a little bit harder. You're selling an idea instead of a product or something. It's like not quite there. Or we should just figure out what the free version is. Would be my sense, and start moving forward on that front.
Yeah, I think the question that I had really was, and I agree with you, Andy, about that assessment. Sometimes you just want to know what you're working with, but well, all the time you want to know what you're working with. But the question, I guess, then I have around specifically, what are we going to do? We have a work plan that 2026, this is the thing that we want to accomplish, right? And that it's very clear, at least from the perspective of the pieces that we are engaged in this area, because I feel like it's very clear around tourism and even cultural institutions, but this business of how do you get people engaged, how do you get people plugged in, which serves all of those things. It's not clear what is our target in terms of it around that engagement. And if we could set that target, then maybe we could backwalk into what are the activities, now that we've been thinking about some of the hows, but what are the activities, and then maybe back into a little bit more of what the costs are, to then figure out, okay, this is where we might need to raise money for this, or this is what we have for that. But I was like, not to be shady, but I mean, just like America, to throw a party, but like literally serve crudité. Like, are you serious? People need food, like meat on the bone to engage. So I'm just curious about how might we organize ourselves around the expectation once we kind of figure out what the expectation is.
I did it again. Is there work that we feel that this subcommittee can do to help put meat on the bones?
I guess one of the things maybe it's something that Jason can speak to. Hi, Jason.
Hi,
I
Jason.
came late too. Is again, who does what and how much the commission ends up getting in the weeds? Because I'm not in the business of creating programs. I have no interest in creating programs. I want people to create programs for themselves. Also work with the legislature a lot. And so I know that it is extremely dangerous to ask them to fund something specific, because if you want to change it at all, because it's not working, you have no ability to change it. Mm-hmm. So I think that maybe, and as Leanne said, I've heard Jason speak to this. I cannot speak to it. Maybe if Jason speaks now that he's here, to what the proposal is to the legislature, maybe it will be a little more clear, like where our help is needed. Because again, it goes back to like, are we in the weeds creating programs? I don't want to be in the weeds creating programs. No interest, can't, have no time. So, so anyway, would that be helpful to people?
Well, we have the benefit of having Jason here, and Cindy has just indicated that he's got a nice coherent pitch that he's given to legislators. So can we hear it, Jason?
Right.
I don't even know what I'm stepping into at this particular moment.
We were kicking off the meeting with just some updates on where things are with the asks for funding. Cindy had talked a little bit about the 100,000 from the private foundation that's going to another staff person to assist, as well as to get the conference taken care of. But, you know, she walked us through some of the things that are in the 14 million ask to legislators, but indicated that you had a really nice pitch focused on bringing the 4 themes of the commission into every community in the state. Can you give us your elevator pitch on how it's
best I can at this particular moment? So I think that, you know, for the work of this subcommittee, and I think the message that I'm trying to share with the other subcommittees that I've joined recently is we cannot be in the weeds. I think our goal here is really to be the connectors and the shapers of the communities that we want to connect, that we want to reach. And our goal is to be as broad as possible and as inclusive as possible. And I think it's up to us as a commission and as this subcommittee to really shape what that looks like. You know, I think we're trying to move away from or at least what I'd like to see is this move away from, or at least not a sole focus on, the sort of older white historical society level engagement. If we're going to talk to communities, we need to make sure that there's broader representation that we're connecting with in these towns, cities, and tribal nations. You know, as far as, and I mean, I don't know if that's just too reductive, but I also don't want to create the programmatic pieces. You know, communities need to shape these initiatives in the way that they see fit, that reflects where they're at, and in conversation with us where we want to see them go, that align with the themes of the commission. We've had some conversations. I think Weathersfield was, to me, a very productive conversation that brought together a number of town committees that included their human rights group, their social justice initiatives, as well as their sort of heritage commission, which I think is a nice model. I'm not sure what other communities are looking like at this point, because we haven't had the level of engagement. So I'd sort of push it back to Cindy to give us an update on where are we at, because I think that's, if we're only reaching a dozen towns at this point, we've got a lot of work to do in terms of a subcommittee that might work through more centralized organizing bodies like the councils of governments, the councils of small towns, and organizations like that. So Cindy, Denise, myself, Sarah Harris, and Jonathan Harris have made some time to attend these meetings, and we've made outreach, but I think that's just building awareness. We've got a lot more work to do in terms of building the substance of these relationships. I don't know if that accomplished what I just stepped into and what you wanted to hear.
No, that's helpful, Jason. Thank you.
But I do think that's the work.
I do have a question, but Jason, do you want to finish your sentence?
No. Go ahead, Merle.
What do we have to work with to do that? I think that that's the part that is what makes it hard, right? And we've already talked about the fact that some communities, because they are navigating other types of needs, within the community, they don't have necessarily the bandwidth, and certainly won't have necessarily the resources, but could make this a part of their process of engagement if they were able to, let's say, financially or in some way, in-kind way, benefit from the engagement. So I'm thinking about, you know, how do you raise awareness in communities that you're trying to reach? Yes, you can talk to the leaders, quote unquote, of those communities, but what is the difference when you put people on the ground to talk about these things? And maybe groups that are organizing around other issues could be incentivized to add this to their awareness building campaigns and engagement campaigns, if in fact people are compensated for it. So I'm just kind of wondering, those are some strategies that we've definitely used in New York to raise awareness about things, is, you know, groups that are organizing groups, you give them funds to actually organize around the thing that you want to build awareness. So that, I think, is also part of the question that I have. And really, what is the target? Do we want to say not just that we've reached out to X number of communities and you know, representationally in a particular way, but that we're measuring metrics around the actual engagement with the 250th that is observable, participation and attendance, or at least interest in engaging with the commission meetings online, right? What are the kinds of, like, I'm just trying to figure out, how do we take the steps with the clarity that there's probably ways that we can think about amplifying this work, but it's gonna require some resources.
So I really appreciate that, Merle, and it reminds me of a conversation that Cindy and I just had a couple of days ago with Michelle McCabe, who's doing a lot of work with Connecticut Main Street. And part of that conversation was really oriented around meeting communities and organizations where they're at, and where do we see this work happening that aligns with the goals of the commission. And I think that's more or less what I said with the education subcommittee. Like, there are already existing initiatives and programs and organizations that are doing relevant work. It might not be 1776 directive or directed, but it is situated around civic vibrancy and community engagement and you know, inclusive initiatives in civic life in their communities. And I think I would like to start positioning us in a way that's engaging in those themes, and not always this sort of look back to 1776, like we've got to, you know, rattle around the flags and the, you know, the genealogies, but, you know, where is this happening in the relevant places to communities today, and find those connective points and build those relationships out.
You know, I was thinking about Merle's earlier comment about the, you know, the budget as a reflection of values. And I think that, you know, this point has been made by several members of this subcommittee. You know, we're highly aware of the need to compensate people for their time. Cindy laid out a bunch of things in the ask, and one of the things was funding for that kind of engagement, outreach, site visits, promotion, folks from the commission going out. But what about, could some of those funds be actually, instead of for folks on the commission, for folks in the community, to compensate them for their time, to actually do that work in a way that will be more authentic and, I think, potentially received in a better way. And because then, if so, then our, you know, some of the work that we do in the subcommittee becomes identifying, you know, who those individuals could be, who could bring in, you know, their networks. I mean, we're already kind of doing that with the organizational identification in our like big outreach spreadsheet. But, you know, if we're thinking more on relationship building and there's funds to help compensate people for their time doing work on behalf of the commission, you know, that I think becomes a little bit different. It clarifies it. It puts a finer point on it.
And just, I misspoke if I said at any point commission members were to be compensated.
Okay.
Commission members cannot be compensated.
Okay,
Uh,
well, maybe I just assumed that. I don't know what the money is for. It's for going out.
They
to these
can't be
places.
compensated in their roles as commissioners.
Correct. Yes,
So that's a little nuance there.
it is. Yeah.
Um,
But I just didn't want that to.
yeah, no,
Sure,
you
okay,
didn't.
yeah.
But my sense of what I heard was that if there were an expense related to doing the outreach work, that's how that would be covered. But I really, as I was thinking, I was like, oh, right. One of the, the work that we do in thinking about and partners do around, get out the vote, they literally take that civic engagement work to nonprofits to actually integrate, right? And it's $20,000, $10,000, $15,000 to a nonprofit that does community facing work, could be very helpful around just offering peer educators, peer leaders, peer networks that are, to Amaris's point, credible messengers. That's what we need. We need credible messengers for this work. And that, to me, really happens pretty exclusively in and from community.
So my question is, though, whose job is that? Right. So, I mean, I think I think I don't dispute anything you're saying. I completely 100% agree. Is it the commission's job to come up with this? Or is this or Connecticut Humanities as the executor of the commission? Like that, and that's where, and that's what I'm just like, that's my question.
Yeah, Liz, for me, what I just suggested is merely a strategy, right? So if Connecticut Humanities has the resources, they can put out an RFP to groups to say, apply for a small impact grant around the 250th commission. And, you are granted, $10,000 or $20,000 to, engage. And then there's a mechanism that, tracks that engagement, right? And the numbers reached and all of the things that kind of traditionally go with a grant. But I think it's the commission's responsibility to generate the ideas around the strategy for how we're going to get into these communities, right? And then sort through the mechanism. Now, I don't know, Jason, I may have just made some work for you that you're like, no, but that, to my mind, is sort of how you take at a top level a tactical approach, right? There's a broader strategy, right? But one of the tactics could be this.
But
Yeah,
we don't have that money right now. We'll know in 13 weeks if we're going to have any money for a year or not. We've been spending a lot of time talking about what we'll do if we have this money. Merle, what you said is my understanding of exactly what we ought to do. And I think it's what the page that we've all been on is that we would set up a framework and a set of principles that people could, buy into, but we would try to sell them into. And then the commission through Connecticut Humanities would give them money to go do those things as they see fit that, fit their organization. And then as the engagement subcommittee, it was our job to sort of be the hype people for the project, make sure everybody who might not see themselves in it would hear about it and understand that we have an expansive, capacious view and encourage them to do it. And I think that, if we have $14 million to spend over a few years, we could do that probably pretty effectively with all the pitfalls and challenges of talking about America across our fractured reality. Yeah. But we could do it. But we're not going to, we all are pulled in a lot of directions. I don't know if there's any work we need to do until we find out if we have any resources or what those are in the next 2 months that will make a big difference. But maybe we should start thinking about what we'll do on May 9th if there's not funding this year. And to think instead about the governor has instructed us to try to make a hoopla around the 250th. We have a set of professional, ethical commitments about what we think that ought to look like. We've done, I think, some really good work trying to think about what that can look like with our themes and whatnot. And I think we maybe should start thinking about what we would do for the next 15 months with our current set of resources, which is a conversation we haven't had yet. Unless, Jason and Cindy, I'm misunderstanding, and this money's definitely coming in May, but that's not my understanding of what this budget session is looking like. So, you know, maybe we ought to talk instead about either not meeting until May or figuring out the no money version. Because talking about how to spend money we don't have, we've been doing that for a year. I think we are ready to spend the money. But you know, time is precious.
Yeah,
That makes a lot of sense.
Andy. I
DIY
think we
version.
need to have. Sorry,
Backup
who am I
plan.
interrupting? I think Doug was talking.
You can always automatically disregard anything I'm saying. I like Andy's approach. You know, sure, if we get money, that'll make it a lot easier, but we need to talk about the DIY version of what are we gonna, you know, how are we gonna do this? A little more tactics and strategy.
I want to think about some of the things that are at our disposal right now as mechanisms to do soft work, I guess, in this vein. The Declaring Freedom Conference is potentially a place to do some of that. And I'm hopeful that everybody has signed up for at least day 3, if not also day 4. Which I think, and I don't know if, you know, Jason and Cindy, you can talk a little bit more if you would like to about kind of the contours of that day, which seem to me right now to be set up as a series of conversations. I don't know how those will be led or, you know, sort of facilitated. But, you know, I think that, you know, one of the things that's quite key is that this is happening at the Student Center at CCSU. The governor will be there. And we want the state to see that people are interested in this. So, you know, hopefully everyone will sign up and show up and share this opportunity, because I think it's an opportunity. The way I am thinking about it, it's certainly an opportunity for the commission to speak out. But I think it's going to be a real opportunity for the commission to learn what ideas and inspiration are out there already and what people are talking about in the communities. And if we can do some work, you know, in our roles on the subcommittee to make sure that the people that we want to be participating can show up that day, if that's possible. I know it's like coming up really soon. That is an opportunity that doesn't cost us anything more than money that's already being spent to help do some of this learning and outreach in a passive way. So I don't know if Cindy and Jason want to say anything about day 3 and what the aims are for the commission.
Can I, before they do, can I just comment on something you said? Like, yeah. I've heard that this is happening. I literally just got an ability to sign up for this today. And so I don't know who we think is going to be there besides ourselves that you're going to be talking to and learning from. Like, so I'm not dissing it. There's a role for it. I just don't know how this go on the same people. And it's limited. I mean, although if there's 250 people there, that's great. So I'm not saying it's not good. I'm just like,
But, you know, I agree. I mean, I don't think this is necessary to get everyone that we're trying to reach out to. I think, you know, we're going to be doing as much as we can to publicize it to our list and the museum community. And I think that, it's worth discussing. You know, I don't know if Cindy, if you guys are planning on sharing information about those 2 public days with kind of the list that we've already built in our spreadsheet, because that's one concrete thing that we can be, you know, doing right now is spreading the word.
So Cindy, can you share a little bit on the framework of who's being invited I think Matt had a plan for the communities that were going to be engaged in this process. I mean, we're not going to hit every community, but there was some sense of we need to create an equitable approach to this plan. Although, I mean, it all feels very last minute. To your point, Liz.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm in about 12 different places. So in terms of sharing the information about this, it has been shared with kind of the history organizations. It's been shared with the Connecticut Humanities mailing list. As of right now, there's a list of groups to reach out to in that spreadsheet, but there's not a lot of contact information, which is where it's challenging to share out the information if I don't know who to send it to. So I think that would be really helpful. In terms of the actual conference itself, I'm waiting to line up one last moderator and then I'll get the moderator names up on the website. It's really a look at trying to bring in as many different voices as possible to kind of share the commission's thinking behind the themes in a new, in a way that will probably seem new to a lot of the history organizations that are there and a lot of the more traditional history focused folks. I think that answers everything that was brought up, but
I might have been thinking about day 1 and day 2 of the conference.
Oh.
Sorry, when I was talking about the schools and communities that are going to be engaged in the process. I don't know that the same thing has happened for day 3 and 4.
Yeah, days 1 and 2 were filled back in December. There are schools from every county at the very least. And I want to say, if I remember correctly, it's 15 schools from around the state, a mix of rural, suburban, and urban. And there are going to be, I believe it's 250 students and about 50 to 100 different educators. And then day 4 is really being promoted by ASH, and it's focused on small and medium-sized organizations. And I think Amherst probably knows more about that than I do.
Yeah, I've been talking with Alison Nori at ASH about this. I think we're going to do a lot of work to promote that day as well, because our idea here is that we can bring in museums to have it a more interactive day where they can actually share ideas and meet one another and meet. I think more imagining it as more of like a networking and idea sharing day. So it's coming together. I can send out some information about how to sign up for that as well. I mean, I think that, I'm looking, this brings us to the outreach list. And I think that, we did some good work the last time that we met on fleshing that out. What I hear is a strong request from Cindy right now to like ASAP flesh out the email addresses for that. And looking at the sheet right now, there are probably 5 actual email contacts on that list of like 60 plus organizations. So I think it would be really great if, by what's a good deadline to set for this, Cindy? The end of the week, Monday, to add as much as we can to that list. If your name's next to it, put something there.
Yeah, and then I can get this out to everybody on that list.
Yeah.
So
I'm sorry if this is like implied in the conversation. Just can someone tell me the difference between so I get that day one and two are for schools, teachers. I get it. What is so and 4 is for historical societies, museums. Is that right? Who's day 3 for? Who's coming to day 3 that's not coming to day 4 or vice versa? What's the differentiation between those two programs, agendas, etc.?
I'm not sure what the difference is completely in the audience, to be honest. I anticipate that day 4 will be strongly represented, or day 3, by museums and other history practitioners, but I am hoping, especially once we share the full speaker list, that we can attract people who don't see themselves in the 250th, but should, in the sense of the conversations will be more broad than just history. And so I hope that once we have the speakers on there, people get a sense of that and realize that this isn't just going to be a history conference day. Thanks, Liz.
Let's say it like it is. This was not a commission thing, and this is kind of what we hope to have happen. And it happened. Somebody took it and said, not happening. I want it to happen. I'm going to create it like this, and I'm not going to ask anybody for input. I'm going to tell people what it's going to be. And so this is us taking advantage of being told what it was going to be. So Andy, I know you're looking for like this is 100%, but this is not what we have gotten. And it's either, I think, walk away or use the opportunity, especially because the governor is
Going to be there.
big.
Governor, my understanding is the governor's going to be there on day 3. Is he going to be there on day 4?
No.
So, I mean, again, I'm not trying to walk away from the opportunity. I'm trying to maximize it.
Right.
And it sounds to me like we may be diluting our efforts. I mean,
we don't have a choice. It's not ours. Right. So that's all I'm saying. Because Jason and Cindy are not going to say this. This is not ours. This is somebody else's thing. And we have a chance to play. So yes, it might not have been how we are playing, how we would create this.
But to Andy's point, since we're essentially, we have day 3, how do we make the most of it?
Right.
Is there anything else we can do to?
But we don't have day. But we is not day 4. It's just day 3. That's out. Okay.
The commission is
getting emails from commission members asking me about involvement on day 4. So that was maybe my slippage here on not understanding what was what.
That's my fault.
No, not just you, Amherst. Several people have emailed me about what am I doing on day 4. And I said, I didn't know there was a day 4. I deleted day 4 from my calendar because I got invited to 3 days. So now I'm understanding there's 3 days. I can understand making the most of the situation totally. I was trying to ask about why we were programming, how we were programming 2 days, but we're actually only programming 1 day. Okay, this is
Missions programming.
Okay, thank you for setting me straight.
With a little bit of input from the league, are programming day 4.
But we today don't have to talk about day 4 or 1 and 2. We can just talk about day 3 when there's going to be a bunch of historical societies who have come because it's a day out of the office, historical societies and museums, and we think there are actually going to be a fair number of them there, including the governor. So we get to put on a show for the 10 minutes maybe before the governor leaves from 9:15 to 9:25 when we really want to talk to him. And then there's an opportunity to address that audience who's going to be there on the rest of the people who are there the rest of the day, which is a great opportunity. I think it's fantastic. And, well, okay, now because there's a brief silence, I'll say this. I think what we should do on day 3 is not talk about resources, not talk about funding, not talk about what the commission's going to do, but try instead, and I think this is available to us in the structure that's already set up. Whoever set it up was very wise about just doing the 4 themes, and just try to, talk about how your organization that probably come 2026, there's going to be a fair amount of people who are interested suddenly in the anniversary. And here's how your organization might engage. We've done some work for you in setting up these themes. So, for example, I went to the, I'm not speaking for them in any way, but just I was yesterday with, at the Mashantucket Pequot Museum the other day, Jason, and your old stomping grounds. And we were talking about what they might do around 1776. And one of the things that I said sort of offhandedly, but not whatever, is don't do anything. Announce it's the 250th, and then say, you may notice that our whole museum doesn't mention the date 1776 because that's an insignificant moment in our tribal history. And we wanted to show off the other moments that foreground our engagement with America. We don't have much to say about the Declaration of Independence besides its reference to merciless savages. But these are the moments in our last 300 years in history that we want you to know about, where it might be one panel that means to unsettle 1776. So they don't have to, they're not going to do that because I said it or whatever, but it's just a way of saying you can push against, engage with the anniversary in a way that might attract new people into your organization that doesn't really require a ton of funding. It's just sort of making the most of the moment and the interest on your own terms. And I think that's always been what we wanted people to do. And so maybe the agenda for day 3, again, is, unless something happens in the next month where it looks like we're going to have a bunch of money, I really think we need to be talking about what your organization can do without spending extra money to engage this moment when a lot of people are going to be interested in history in America who might not otherwise be interested. And we want to help you do that just by being people who have thought about it for a while. Because, we don't have anything else to offer, but I think we do have a fair amount to offer on that front.
Good. Okay. Do we feel good about, yeah, I mean, I guess the clarification that I would provide just about days 3 and 4, days 1 and 2 have been kind of like by invitation, schools, educators. Days 3 and 4 are open to the public and they're free. So what I see as like the opportunity here is to get as many people as possible at those 2 days. Who are interested. You have to ticket them separately. I'm still waiting for the e-blast from Matt Warshauer that will give us like the big coherent overarching story about how to market this conference or how he wants it to be marketed. I don't know if you've received that yet, CTH, but I think that that's what I'm seeing as my role in my job right now, is just trying to get the word out and encouraging people to show up.
And we do expect something from this Matt Warshauser. Is that his name? Like we expect.
Yeah, no, I mean, I spoke with him in person last week and he was like, next week you'll have something to share out. So as soon as I get it, I'll share it. Right now we have information, I think, independently about days 3 and 4. There's not really an agenda for day 4 that's publicly shared yet, but I assume Allison will be posting it soon. Okay.
So I think this conversation around the conference is helpful, in terms of just orienting ourselves. So I do want to sort of, if we can, just step back to the conversation that I think Andy and Merle were touching on earlier in terms of coming back to how do we engage communities? How do we scenario plan around having money and having no money? And what can this particular group subcommittee do in order to sort of frame that conversation, or how best to engage the publics that we want to reach. And just for reference, we've put together sort of a sketch of a budget that outlines how we see spending this around education, community engagement, statewide exhibitions. So we've sort of created a template with not a lot of specificity. So this is also the moment that this subcommittee can help us shape what that looks like, should we get the funding.
Great. Great. Merle, Merle stepped away. When she comes back, I would like to have some time to revisit the IDEA. Sorry, what are we calling them? The assessment for this, but I don't want to do that without Merle here. I think that, sorry, I have so many. Oh, she's back. Okay, great. Merle, we had some great conversations as a larger subcommittee based on the facilitated exercises that we did at our last meeting. And I'm wondering if there's anything you want to share initially about that, but I thought one of the things that we could do in this meeting is dig into, you had asked, we didn't really get into the IDA assessment in that meeting, but I think there's space in this subcommittee meeting to, revisit what your team has come up with. And I'm kind of hoping that you're willing to sort of walk us through that, as Cindy has popped the assessment in the chat, but I kind of wanted to give you space also to offer any reflections you might have on what you took away from the conversation we had as a larger commission at our last meeting.
Well, thank you. And thanks, really to folks digging in. I think what I really believe that John and I are trying to get to is active engagement with applying or thinking about what are the ways that we are going to know that we are working with an IDEA approach or lens to whatever the process is. And I think, Cindy, you popped in some of the ideas or suggestions for metrics, right? Perfect. And so really, does it make sense is really what we're looking to understand. How might we make it, strengthen it to be in, in alignment with what and how we think we can accomplish any of these particular goals of the subcommittee. And then I think the other thing we were looking for was a commitment from each subcommittee to have a designated 2 people that would hold the IDEA perspective specifically, right? Almost like process observers in a group, to ensure that we were multiplying our ability to carry that beyond just John and myself in any given situation. So those are the 2 things we were looking to do. And going to item 2 then on this list, I guess the question is, what are people's general reactions to these track? Does this make sense? Are you now wondering, well, how will we measure these things? What information or data would we need to collect? How would we know? And so really it's an open question to you all.
Is the idea that the members of this subcommittee will be doing this measurement, or that we will be setting up a mechanism for doing so for the administrative arm of the commission? That's one question that I have, because this seems like a lot of data gathering and analysis. Just on if I'm understanding it correctly.
Sorry. I think that what this subcommittee can do is weigh these metrics against our strategies and tactics. So in the case in point that I just made, if we had money and we wanted to engage different groups, there would be some, consideration around how might you do that? Does this strategy or tactic, right, help us increase the likelihood that we're going to engage people of color, young people, immigrant communities? Will that tactic that we're suggesting actually help us do that? And then the measurements actually, if there are measurements, and I know that I'm talking to like 5 or 6 PhDs here, so I'm using the term loosely, but how might we put into our documents a way for communities to report on some of this information so that we have a sense of who do they plan to engage as a part of their work? Who's leading the work? And what does that look like? And so on and so forth. So maybe some, drawing on the very extensive CTH survey, right? You all have this incredible annual survey. The team is like, so not that dramatic or, robust, but a way to actually capture some information in the process itself.
Yeah, my reaction to this is just like what you guys have suggested is like very like it's like the most basic way of looking at this. Like, how could we not do that? I keep thinking, is there more? Is there more? But this is just like the most basic level that we should be looking at as a sieve, right? To measure. I mean, everything, it's a strategy screen. Right? That's what it is. And so my assumption, and maybe this is a commission, decision or whatever, is that, as if Connecticut Humanities are the people giving out the grants, or if the Office of the Arts ends up giving out grants for a 250th, that like as a condition of those grants, we've got to figure out how to put this strategy screen in place. Right. And so one of the strategies, I used to say that as a kid, strategies. One of the strategies on the front end is, having this be an evaluation criteria if there's funding, and the other strategy on the back end is giving people on the front end the ability to, the tools they need to actually report on this, and making it clear the expectation is that they're going to report on this. And those are for things that might be funded. I think the tricky thing happens when if we're not funding them, like then it becomes sort of like, here, tell us. And then that's kind of like all bets are off. You kind of need to have some control in order to be doing some of these measurements. Not for everybody, but for a lot of people. So, I track most of these things in my grants now. And there's ways to track them, and definitely there's people who can help you, who collect data, actually figure out how you are asking the questions in a way that they're not too onerous. So like, I think that should be. So yes, it just doesn't seem like, to me, I'm like, what else? Like,
yeah, and I will say that when John and I were thinking about this, it unfortunately maybe was with the assumption that people might be applying for some commission resources to do events. And so it is right, that's what it is. It's just a screening for, are these things present, or have you given consideration to them, and needing to respond to that in the context of applying for funds. If there's no money, right, we're not going to ask people to engage in this particular process, but it might tell us something about a screen for this subcommittee in general about what does our outreach list look like as a subcommittee, and how are we screening for some of these elements for the subcommittee itself.
Thank you. That was really helpful to me, because when I see these words measure and evaluate and track, that to me just sounds like a crap ton of work. So hearing you talk about it as a screen where you're saying like, are people thinking about these things, really helps me clarify what, like, it's not, it doesn't sound as much of work. It's like, yes, no, maybe to some extent, not like, you know, we need data collection, right? You know, so that really helps me. You know, what I think the conversation thus far suggests to me is two things. One is taking this and turning it into a screen for our own work as a subcommittee, and then also offering, regardless, you know, and I think this gets into that question of like, you know, plan A, plan B, like money, no money, some money, somewhere in between, you know, the level of control thing that Liz was just talking about. Like, we can create a self-assessment form kind of based on these things for organizations who are planning things. It's very much in line with the IDEA goals that the commission has already put forth, right? So maybe that is work that we can do as a subcommittee that is a light lift, you know, turn this into a screen for ourselves and you know, a lens that we can bring to evaluating our list and figuring out where we can do better work, but then also creating something that is a part of the toolkit that an organization can use when they're thinking about their programs. It's kind of already there in the guidance that we've issued, but I like that idea of like putting it in as like a little checklist. Are you thinking about this? Are you doing this? Are you taking steps to do this? That seems to be two concrete things that we could do maybe at like our next meeting.
Well, yeah, so I don't know if it's fun group work, but
or if someone wants to volunteer, I always love that.
I mean, I think it could be in the toolkit, but I do think it should be, you know, much more measurement should be tied, you know, more that I like that. Are you thinking? Because that to me should be going into, right, when you have grant application guidelines, like, as you're writing this grant application, please consider the following. And then you figure out when you're asking if there's a narrative question or if there's a yes or, you know what I mean? Then you put it in there. But if you're going to get money, you're going to give data back. Like, that's just there's just rules, you know? And by the way, the state is going to want that if they invest in this. So there's plenty of people we can work with to help us figure out how to, like, but Connecticut Humanities knows how to do it. I mean, like, you know how to collect data.
You've done a little bit of that before.
Great.
I do think it's really good to put our work through this, and you know, and to put the list through this really first. That's great. You have to just and then what is the question for? Are the other groups discussing this and subcommittees, and are they putting this lens on it? So that would be the other thing on their work.
Well, I mean, I think that was the ask, you know, with the presentation and the conversation that we had with Jason and Cindy. And I don't think that there's a group that needs to do that more than the tourism and marketing group, quite honestly. And I don't have any sense of how they're thinking about those kinds of IDEA considerations as a part of their plans for the work. It's, you know, for the commemorable cremation. I have no idea what's happening. I'm trying to cover it all. But I don't know, maybe Jason, you have some feedback on that or Cindy, from being a part of those conversations as well.
On the tourism side, I agree, Merle. We definitely have a row to hoe there. I don't think I was in the I wasn't the last one, but we definitely need to circle back and make sure that they're thinking about this more concretely. I had a side conversation afterwards, and I think there's a little bit of resistance, but I think there are plenty of opportunities to ensure that we're using this frame.
Well, I'll say this, and again, pardon my frankness. Oh, that AI thing puts my hand up, so ignore that if it pops up. This book, where's the book? What did I do? I might have tossed the book. The book. Y'all know the book I'm talking about. I don't know where it is right now. It was over here.
From the commission meeting?
Yeah.
The book the woman gave out from the commission meeting.
Like things that were invented in Connecticut or something.
One that doesn't have any
Food.
Made in Connecticut.
Yeah.
The Made in Connecticut book. And then we we couldn't find any non-white people to put in the book. Come on now. We have to do better, right? I mean, and that, right, is a formally, engagement that, everybody's supposed. I wish I could find the book. Honestly,
But remember who
that
invited that person. So yeah, so remember, like, that person has nothing to do with the Connecticut Office of Tourism. And so that was just a private person who put that together and got it funded and got it paid. So that was the first thing I looked
right,
through.
but the
Thought to
point
myself,
is, we spent 20 minutes of our time listening to a book about all the great things that white people make in Connecticut.
100%.
That's a problem.
100%.
Like, and the other issue is, if people are watching our meetings and going back to watch our meetings, what are we telling them?
Yeah.
You literally have nothing that we're interested in that you contribute to in the making of Connecticut, which, by the way, was made on the backs people. So this is part of the challenge here of trying to really do this work. If we're not really going to be serious about what it is that we're expecting of people, money, no money, or what have you, you can't really ask people, right, to sit there. And Liz, you asked the question. Like, you asked the question, right? I think it was you who asked the question. Yeah. Thank you, because I didn't want to have to be the one to ask it. So
I was horrified by that. All I wanted to put, so agree, should never have been, I understand there may have been issues about not, I don't want to get into that, but agree. And that's not the State Office of Tourism. That is literally all I wanted to put out.
No, I know it was a different office.
I don't think the tourism office invited this person in either, or the tourism committee. This person was invited in by another person.
Another agency. Yes. No, I get it. But the point is, if we're going to do this IDEA work, we have to permeate all of the spaces to at least ask the questions, right? And that's the point for me around what John and I have been talking about with regards to, equity and inclusion and access.
I'm so glad to hear it, because I came late to that meeting and I was like, what's going on? I just had no idea what was happening. And I seem to have failed to bring my copy of the book home, unfortunately. Or fortunately. I think I have two things that I just, like, a thought that I'm thinking about, like, the whole Make It Here, the new tourism campaign for it's all blurred out, Meryl. It's like, I'm surprised you still have it.
Um, I'm just
Artifacts. You always need
This is
artifacts.
the evidence. Yeah. Anyway, maybe I won't contemplate and just hold my thoughts for a moment because I realize we only have about 10 minutes left. Does anybody want to volunteer to take from, or do we feel that those bullet points are for people who knew what a strategy screen was and didn't have to Google it like I did? Does anybody, like, can you tell me, like, is the way this is articulated a screen? Because it doesn't like look like questions to me. It looks like directions to collect data. So like, you know, I'm happy to take a crack at it, but I've never done a strategy screen before. Does anyone want to like work with me on turning this into a screen for the subcommittee? And then thinking about what that would look like, you know, as a self-assessment for organizations / grantees. I'm just asking for a volunteer to do some work with me because I got the sense from Liz that maybe not worth spending time in a meeting doing that.
I'm not volunteering, but I just want to share that the governance subcommittee is also looking at these metrics and working on kind of a screening for the commission's decision-making process.
Oh, great.
They're working through the questions that were included in Merle and thinking about what the best questions are for the commission to be asking itself when we're making decisions.
Good.
Right, because there is a screen for proposals that was also included in the document. This is sort of the stuff that we're trying to understand, if it's or what we want to have an eye towards looking for.
But it sounds like this is further down the road, and maybe our time in the next few weeks would be best spent attracting groups and people and individuals to day 3, and we can flesh. I mean, I would volunteer to do a strategy screening or whatever. It is important, but
well, I'm just thinking about, you know, the idea that I think several folks have said already, like we need to apply this to the list that we're building, right? Mm-hmm. And so in order to build that list out in the best way, we need to be thinking about these questions, right? Okay. Thank you for sharing that link, Cindy, because I didn't think we were able to get, okay, before the April Commission meeting. So I think Merle had 2 asks of us, like, you know, respond to the metrics. Does it make sense? I think we've had a good conversation about that. We feel good about these as metrics. Yes? We have some consensus there. That's what I'm hearing. You know, with the other ask was to designate 2 people on the subcommittee to basically be the, I don't know what to call it, enforcers, but the folks who are always, you know, having this in their mind and bringing it to, I mean, hopefully we're all going to be doing this to some extent. But the ask is to designate 2 people from the subcommittee to be actively doing that, to really imbibe this and bring it to everything that we're doing.
I'm happy to be one of them.
Okay, great. Anybody else feeling inspired? I know we don't have the whole group today, so I might put out a call. I'm going to send a follow-up email after this, especially with Doug's minutes when those go out, just so that people have a sense of what we talked about. You know, in the absence of somebody else volunteering, I can do that too. I assume it should not be Merle, even though she already has this in her mind. She's doing this work.
Can I ask for a little clarification on this? Maybe it's implicit in the second bullet point, but just thinking about what I guess identifying community needs, like why would, you know, how does what this commission's work does meet the needs of communities, and how do communities define and shape that conversation? And maybe it is implicit there, but who's driving the conversation? Is this an attempt for us to push a particular framework of themes into a community to then plan around, respond to, or how can we sort of at least have some grassroots, like, this is why this commission would matter to us. This is what we need as a community. This is what will move us to participate in a meaningful way. If it's there, then great, but
I'm not, are you talking about B on this?
I'm thinking it's maybe within the second bullet point.
Can you ask your question again? I want to make sure I understand. Can you ask your question again?
In terms of how we're engaging communities when we say BIPOC, people with disabilities, youth, in all aspects of planning. So I'm just thinking, if we're asking people to participate in a planning process, what if we sort of back out and sort of understand why would they even want to engage in the first place? What would be meaningful about the work of this commission to compel them to participate in even planning? Are we asking the right questions from the outset? Are these even the right themes to be focusing on in the work of the commission, that groups who don't see themselves in this, they would want to be or participate because it satisfies something that's meaningful to them? I don't know if that was totally rambling. Might have been.
No, it gets back to the central theme of, like, are we just chasing our own tail, right?
Well, I guess what I understand is that the themes of the commission itself and the focus are broad enough for people to find their way into the conversation if they desire and how they desire. I think this bullet is really about how, if you are proposing to engage, are you taking in consideration and representation and leadership of these communities that have been historically marginalized or left out in the conversation, right? So how is whatever you're doing taking up opportunities to integrate broader points of view, activate and follow the leadership and perspectives of these communities that are not traditionally engaged or historically engaged, or whatever we're saying now about the words. So that's what I think I'm trying to understand. Does that answer your question? Because I don't know that it's asking about the big question of if the themes are right. I thought the themes were set, but it's about, if you're going to engage these things, are you going to talk about Indigenous community, or are Indigenous community going to be present and participating and engaged and leading the conversation about Indigenous community? That, I think, is the intention behind that particular bullet.
Okay, then that makes sense to me then, Merle.
Okay.
Good. Okay. Well, Cindy, you'll be pleased to know that I'm actively developing an agenda for our next meeting based on the work that we still need to do. And here's what I'm thinking. Okay. So just to wrap up where we are, I'm going to email everyone on the subcommittee and request that we flesh out that contact info on the existing spreadsheet for our groups to reach out to by end of business on Monday. Sound good, Cindy? Because that way we still have time to do some advanced work for the conference, and it also gets us in a place where we feel like that's kind of like a thing that we have done. I don't think that list will be done, right? It's a growing thing. I will also ask about another volunteer to work with Liz as our sort of IDEA designees, so that Merle can have that information before the next the full meeting of the commission.
I'd like us to, and I can start by taking a crack at this, but if anybody wants to work with me on it, taking those bullet points and turning them into like a screen that we can use in our work on this subcommittee so that we can share that at the next meeting and look at it together, and make sure that it's sort of in the spirit of each of these bullet points. And then I think we should also apply that screen to the list that we're working on at the next meeting, and see what else we can generate based on that evaluation. And then I think next time we should also talk about the contingency plan for no money. No money plan.
You got to come back, Andy.
Thank you, everyone. Apologies for thanks for your patience with the agenda, and for helping me craft it today. Doug, are you still good being our inquiry fielder? Has that been, or do we want to shift
Yes.
that to somebody
No,
else?
it's fine. We only had one, and it was from the Connecticut Main Street Foundation,
Okay. Great.
which is great and all, but
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it also speaks to like, hopefully that email address will start being overwhelming for just one person, and we'll have to enlist everybody, right, to respond to all these incredible emails that we're getting.
Great. In my follow-up, I'll also include information about days 3 and 4 of the conference and how to sign up. Okay, great. Thank you all for your time today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for being here,
Bye-bye.
Jason.